Part 2. The police station wasn't what I expected. No shouting, no chaos, just fluorescent lights and the quiet hum of bureaucracy. That almost made it worse. This place wasn't built for drama. It was built for routine, which meant people like me passed through it every day. They took my belongings one by one, listing them out loud. Wallet, phone, keys. Hearing my life reduced to objects made my chest feel tight. I answered questions automatically, like muscle memory had taken over. Name, address, employment. Each answer felt like a nail tapping into place. I kept waiting for someone to judge me openly, to ask why, but no one did. They didn't need my story. They already had the facts. That realization stripped away the last of my self-justifications. This wasn't a misunderstanding or bad luck. It was a choice, neatly documented. When I finally sat alone, the adrenaline drained out completely. What replaced it wasn't fear, it was shame. The quiet kind. The kind that doesn't scream, just settles in and refuses to leave. I thought about how easily this could have gone worse. If I'd panicked. If I'd run. If someone had gotten hurt. The idea made my hands shake again. That's when I understood something important. I wasn't unlucky. I was stopped. And that difference would matter later, more than I knew then. When they told me I was being cited and released, relief hit first, fast and overwhelming. Then it curdled into something uglier. Gratitude mixed with embarrassment is a hard thing to swallow. I signed papers I barely read, nodded when told where to go, what to expect next. Walking out of the station felt unreal. The air outside was cold and sharp, like it was daring me to feel normal again. I stood there longer than I should have, just breathing, grounding myself in the fact that I was still allowed to leave. My phone buzzed with notifications. Messages. Missed calls. Life continuing as if nothing had happened. I wanted to scream at it. Didn't it know I'd crossed some invisible line? The walk home was quiet. Every step felt heavier than the last, like my body was catching up with my mind. I kept imagining people could tell, like I'd been marked somehow. That everyone knew what I'd done. When I got home, I didn't turn on the lights. I sat on the edge of my bed and replayed the entire day, start to finish. The doors. The aisle. The voice behind me. Over and over, like repetition might somehow soften it. Sleep didn't come easily. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that gray room again. The desk. The camera. The items sitting there between us. I hadn't gone to jail. But I hadn't escaped either. The days that followed were worse than the arrest itself. Nothing happened, and that was the problem. Consequences delayed are their own form of torture. A court date loomed somewhere in the future, undefined but inevitable. Every time the mail arrived, my stomach dropped. Every unknown number made my pulse spike. I became hyper-aware of my own record, my name, my past. Things I'd never questioned before now felt fragile. I started replaying old decisions through a new lens. How often I'd cut corners. How casually I'd justified small dishonesties. This wasn't an isolated moment, it was a pattern I'd ignored because it hadn't bitten me yet. I avoided grocery stores entirely. When I couldn't, I rushed through them, head down, heart pounding. The sound of scanners made my skin crawl. Rationally, I knew no one was watching me. Emotionally, it didn't matter. Court day finally came, and it was quieter than I expected. A room full of strangers sharing the same tight expressions. When my name was called, it felt like someone else stood up in my place. The judge was efficient. No lecture. Just facts. A fine. Community service. A record. Not life-ending, but life-altering in small, persistent ways. Walking out of that courtroom, I felt lighter, and heavier at the same time. The uncertainty was gone, replaced by something solid. I now knew exactly what this mistake would cost me. Community service wasn't dramatic. That's the point. It's designed to be quietly humbling. Early mornings. cheap vests. Tasks no one thanks you for. I picked up trash along roads people sped past without noticing me. There was a strange clarity in it. Too much time to think. Too much space to replay things honestly. I stopped framing the theft as desperation and started calling it what it was: entitlement. I decided my problems mattered more than the rules everyone else followed. That realization stung worse than any fine. The record followed me subtly. Job applications asked careful questions. Background checks took longer. Doors didn't slam shut, but they didn't open as easily either. What surprised me most was how cautious I became with myself. I no longer trusted my instincts automatically. Every shortcut came with a pause. Every rationalization triggered suspicion. It was exhausting. But it was also necessary. I realized how close I'd come to believing my own excuses completely. How easy it would have been to escalate if I'd gotten away with it. That thought scared me more than the arrest ever did. This wasn't about a supermarket anymore. It was about who I was becoming. It took months before I went back to that supermarket. Not because I needed anything specific, but because avoiding it had started to feel like letting it win. Every time I passed it, my chest tightened, like my body remembered before my brain did. I'd cross the street, make excuses, shop elsewhere, even if it costs more. Fear is expensive like that. The first time I finally walked back in, my hands started shaking almost immediately. Same doors. Same smell. Same lights. My brain flooded me with memories I hadn't invited. I half expected someone to recognize me, to point, to say something. No one did. That was the strange part. The world hadn't saved a version of me the way I had. I moved slowly, deliberately, like I was relearning the rules of gravity. Every item I picked up felt heavier than it should have. I checked prices twice, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to be certain. Certainty mattered now. At checkout, I chose a human cashier instead of self-checkout. That wasn't an accident. I wanted the interaction. I wanted the normalcy. I paid for everything, kept the receipt, folded it carefully, and held it until I was outside. Walking out didn't feel triumphant. It felt grounding. Like I'd reclaimed something small but important, the ability to exist in that space without lying. I realized then that the crime hadn't taken anything tangible from me. It had taken comfort. I didn't tell many people what happened. Not because I was afraid of consequences, those had already arrived, but because explaining it felt complicated. Too many people want a clean narrative, desperation, redemption, lesson learned. This wasn't clean. When I did tell someone, I softened the edges. Called it a mistake. A bad moment. Left out the parts where I'd planned it, justified it, convinced myself I was smarter than the system. Those details felt dangerous to admit out loud. Inside, though, the story replayed itself constantly. Not the arrest, but the internal shift. The moment where I realized how easy it had been to rationalize. That scared me more than the police ever did. I started noticing how often that same voice popped up in other situations. Just this once. No one will notice. You deserve this. I'd never really challenged it before. Now I didn't trust it at all. That created a new tension. I became hyper-aware of my own thoughts, policing myself in ways I never had. It was exhausting, but also clarifying. I understood something important: the theft wasn't the problem. It was a symptom. A visible crack caused by quieter pressures I'd been ignoring for years. Not addressing those would have meant repeating the pattern. I didn't want that story twice. Here's the uncomfortable truth: I got lucky. I didn't lose my job. I didn't go to jail. My life didn't collapse in a dramatic way that would have made for a cleaner moral ending. And for a while, that bothered me. It felt unfair, like I hadn't paid enough. But over time, I realized something else. The absence of catastrophic consequences doesn't mean the moment didn't matter. It just means the lesson arrived quietly instead of violently. I lost something less obvious: The ability to see myself as someone who would never do that. That illusion was comfortable, and it's gone now. In its place is a more honest, less flattering version of me. That version knows he's capable of bad decisions under pressure. Knows he can talk himself into almost anything if he's desperate enough. And knowing that is oddly grounding. Because now I don't rely on imagined moral superiority. I rely on awareness. On pause. On recognizing when I'm sliding into the same mental patterns. I used to think character was about identity, who you are. Now I think it's about interruption. Who you stop yourself from becoming. I didn't lose everything. I lost certainty. And that loss might have saved me later. There's a thin line between survival and entitlement, and I crossed it without noticing. At the time, it felt gradual. Logical. Reasonable, even. Looking back, I can see how quickly need turned into deserve. That's the part people don't talk about enough. Crimes like this don't usually start with malice. They start with exhaustion. With fear. With the belief that rules are optional when life feels unfair. I didn't wake up wanting to be a criminal. I woke up wanting relief. And I chose the wrong shortcut to get there. What scares me now is how familiar that logic still feels. I can recognize it in others. In conversations. In comments. In the way people explain why this exception should be allowed. I'm not judging them. I recognize myself. That's why this story still matters to me. Not because it's dramatic, but because it's common. Ordinary. Quiet. Most lines don't announce themselves. You realize you cross them only when you're already standing on the other side. I didn't write this right away. Time softens things, and I needed that distance to tell the truth without defensiveness. Without pretending I'd grown instantly. Without turning it into a redemption performance. I'm writing now because memory fades, and I don't want this to fade. I want to remember how my stomach dropped when I heard my name spoken by someone who didn't know me. I want to remember the weight of that room, that silence. Stories like this lose their power when they become vague. When they turn into life lessons, without texture. I don't want that. This isn't about warning people that crime doesn't pay. That's obvious. This is about warning people how quietly they can become someone they don't recognize. I'm writing it down so I don't rewrite it later into something more comfortable. Truth is supposed to be uncomfortable. If you're reading this and you're close to crossing a line, any line, pause. Not because you'll definitely get caught. You might not. I almost didn't. Pause because even if no one sees it, you will. And once you see yourself do it, you can unsee it. That version of you doesn't disappear when the moment ends. You carry it into quieter places. Into decisions that seem unrelated. Into the way you justify things later. I'm not here to scare you straight. I'm here to say this: shortcuts don't remove pressure. They relocate it. Usually into places that take longer to heal. I survived this. I moved on. Life continued. But I changed. And that change is the real ending of this story.